Do we have number? And again, it always seems like the media's first response is, "What are the numbers?" And there's almost a sense, right? There's almost a sense, and I love your reaction to this, that when the media reports on the numbers, somehow that absolves them of any responsibility towards really reporting and investigating and understanding the numbers. That somehow the numbers represent, if you will, a complete picture. I'm a quote unquote member of the media. I'm what you call the independent media. There's a bunch of us in the state, and I think of some of the folks who do an amazing job. Steve Alquist is one of them. He comes to mind. He's a pal.
I second that endorsement.
Yep. No, just an amazing resource. I learn from him all the time.
Yeah.
And there are others. What do you think is Rhode Islanders' true understanding of the numbers? The average, that quote unquote average Rhode Islander, not the bougie ones that hang out. And I always get a kick, by the way, when the folks, the upper crusties, talk about, well, you should love Rhode Island. I mean, you get to go down, if you will, to Narragansett and dip your toes in the water, and then catch the Newport Jazz Festival in Newport, and there's nothing quite like a night on Federal Hill. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. My feet on the street research tells me there's a lot of Rhode Islanders out there for whom that is pure fiction. There's a tendency by those in power to just present this Pollyannish version of our state. And I love this state. I've been here for 35 years. Ain't leaving. But there's this Pollyannish polish put on this state by those who probably have the power and the resources to, quite frankly, do better. So what are the numbers, and do you think the average Rhode Islander, not the bougie ones, but the ones who are working 2 or 3 jobs, do you think they really understand? And let me throw in one last thing, because I'm on a running question that Sister Hildegard would already have the ruler out on me. Do you think folks in power understand how expensive it is to be poor in Rhode Island?
The quick answers to those questions are no and no. I think plenty of people do understand what it is like to struggle, right? We have lots of conversations with folks about, their parents worked hard and worked multiple jobs, and the middle class struggle and against the American dream. But I think when we really talk about folks who are really deeply struggling, right? People who are spending a disproportionate amount of money on rent, and then they're managing childcare. And, I think that's the real struggle that a lot of people don't understand. And how hard and how expensive it is to be poor, how exhausting it is to be poor in our state, in our country. And like I said at the top, these are all policy choices. People don't wake up and say, I'm going to live a life of poverty. People are doing everything that they can do to make ends meet, to try to provide for themselves or to provide for their children. And they're working in a system that was designed to work against them and to keep them down, and in particular when we look at communities of color. Mm-hmm. But to go back to your question as well, what we're faced with here in Rhode Island is on any given night in Rhode Island, there's 1,267 folks that are experiencing homelessness in our state. That number is based off a count that we do required by HUD. Everyone, all of the states do this. One night in January, everybody goes out and literally counts the numbers of folks that are experiencing homelessness. We're counting folks in emergency shelter or transitional shelter or out living on the streets. And it happens all across the country on one night in January. And what it serves to do is to give a snapshot. And then that number kind of is stacked year over year over year to determine trends, right? And it gets really deep, families versus individuals, or veterans, or men, or women, or black and white, all sorts of things. What we know here in Rhode Island, that our unsheltered number has gone up 67% in the last year, which is significant. Yep. So for an agency like ours, so now we don't operate an emergency shelter. We're more of a services homeless service provider, right? We're doing our street-based outreach work. We're not doing a lot of like place-based when it comes to that side of the organization. So for us, that's a big number. That's huge. And when we back that against the last 4 years or so, that number has been close to quadrupled. That's really significant. So the numbers of people that are outside sleeping out, rough sleeping, has been going up, and that was a lot of that. Well, it was pre-COVID, so we were already on a trend. To go back to another question you asked, we were already on a trend with those numbers. Were going up and up and up. The flip side of looking at this as a problem is that it's a problem that can be solved. And for a state as small as Rhode Island, one of our greatest treasures and our attributes, it's one of the things that we joke about is one of our detriments, but it's really one of our attributes, is that we are so small and we're all so interconnected here. You know, we're not 7 degrees of separation. It's like 1.5 degrees, right? It's like the Kevin Bacon game on steroids, right?
Yep.
And so we don't need to go far to either find a problem that someone else is experiencing here, but also find a way that we can work towards a solution. So on the one hand, we can look at other communities across the country that have, 10,000, 20,000 people experiencing homelessness. Our numbers here for the state, that's a completely solvable problem. And so we as a state should be able to come together and not just really do the one thing that ends someone's homelessness, which is make housing. But there's a lot of other things that we can be doing as a state to really meet someone's basic needs when they need them to be met, and to really try to get involved before someone ends up in a real chronic homelessness situation.